And what a pleasure it is to have Scott Merkin getting up early for us this morning out there in Arizona to talk all things Chicago White Sox. MLB.com senior reporter. Give him a follow on X at Scott Merkin. And, Scott, we do appreciate it. We know it's not easy sometimes to get up when you're on the road this early in the morning to do a team preview for us here. But what about the Southsiders this year? It does feel like Jensen's talked about it here. You get the feeling that this spring, does it feel different, that there is a ray of hope here for this baseball team?
Yeah, thanks for having me. First of all, I think it would be early even if I was in Chicago, but it's good being out here. Jensen's faced the White Sox, and he's seen them over the years. He's seen their ups and their downs, and they've been rebuilding more than they've been contending over the last decade, unfortunately. Maybe not decade, but 6-7 years. And I think they're moving in the right direction. There's a definite vibe in that clubhouse. Now, vibes don't necessarily always mean you're going to win 95 games, but I think you have to have that improved vibe when you've gone through what they've had. They've had 3 straight years with 100-plus losses. They had the 121 losses in 2024, which is still shockingly, fresh to talk about, unfortunately, although I think the Sox are pretty much behind that because that group is pretty much gone. But, they have that young group together. And, the goal of the rebuild when you start doing this is you build this core together, and they learn together. They unfortunately lose together. And then, you got to start winning together. And I think they feel like this is the time. I think they feel like they have an improved team. And it's all going to depend, primarily on how much that core continues to develop as it goes into 26.
Definitely. And Scott, obviously, when you trade basically a face of a franchise as impactful as Garrett Crochet was, you hope that the prospect return is one that can be maybe not immediately impactful, but certainly one that could get to the big leagues quickly. That is the case now in watching what Kyle Teal has done. Chase Meadroth will be in the middle of the diamond and probably towards the top of that lineup. Both those guys central to the success. Let me start, though, in the middle of the lineup, because I think this is where people start to see that next leap forward. Colson Montgomery, one of the great young shortstops and prospects in our game. And then maybe the surprise of the offseason, getting Munetaka Murakami to sign there in Chicago. For people that don't know how it kind of transpired, what does that now mean for a guy that might have 30 home run potential there right in the middle of the Sox lineup?
Yeah, it was interesting. I talked to Chris Getz, the general manager of the White Sox, a little while after they signed him. And, he was on their radar from last August. But again, you guys all saw the projections. The projections were, $200 million, $170 million, and that was not going to be what the Sox were going to spend this offseason. So it wasn't until about a week to 10 days before his signing period ended that they realized they had a chance, and it happened quickly. Chris talked about they had their final Zoom at like 11:30 Central Time on a Friday night, and he had to use some of his friends who were in the medical profession to make sure he got that physical done on Saturday because, the date for the negotiating period was coming to an end. But, it's huge. You don't know what he's going to be at the major league. I will say this. You saw them win the World Series. They won the World Series in 2005, and they had Tadahito Iguchi at second base, and Shingo Takatsu was the closer for the first month of the season of that year, and then the year before that. And I still think this is by far the biggest player from the Pacific Rim area they've had in their franchise history because he's that well known over there. I would compare him in terms of notoriety, and as he's pointed out many times to me and everyone else, he has yet to take a major league swing, but I'd compare it to like Tim Anderson when Tim was in his prime, when Tim was winning the batting title. Tim was hitting the stalk-off home run at the Field of Dreams game, and just everything he did was a news story at that point. And that's what Murakami's kind of like. And not only is it opening up that area for player recruitment in the future, but interest too. The Sox are becoming now more of an international brand, and they feel like Murakami is going to really help that team. And you know how that ballpark hasn't recently played as great as it did in terms of hitters, but in the summer months, out to right center there, that ball is going to fly, and that you got the right hitter up there. And same with Colson. Colson had 21 homers in 71 games after he came up last year. So, Miguel Vargas over at third, it could be a very strong middle lineup. But you can't understate what Murakami has meant, his signing. He's with Team Japan right now in the WBC, but he was there for a couple weeks, so got his kind of feet wet, and then he'll come back, finish up, and get ready to go.
Talking with MLB.com senior reporter Scott Merkin, all things White Sox here. And Scott, and what we do, and certainly my antenna went up when I saw that the win total was set at 66.5 this year for a team that just won 60 games a year ago. So clearly in the betting market, they're starting to say, hey, we expect this team to be improved. As Jensen and I break down each one of these teams as we get ready for the regular season, you try to see the identity of certain teams, whether it's pitching heavy, whether it's going to be, hey, they're going to score some runs, maybe the defense suffers. What do you think the identity will be of this White Sox team for this year?
I think, we've been talking about this in camp. I think it's almost got like, I don't want to downplay them, but it's almost kind of got like a collegiate identity, where they're going to, because they don't have necessarily at this point, there's no Aaron Judge on this team, not yet at least, right? There's no, Mike Trout in his prime. There's no Shohei Ohtani on any team but the Dodgers, right? He's one of a kind. But, I think it's going to be a team that takes the extra base, that, plays hard all the time, that does the little things to win, and then has this great, it's about their youth, right? It's about their youthful talent that is coming now and more that's coming later in season. You have Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, top left-handers, prospect-wise, they'll come up during the year. Tanner McDougal, he's been hitting 100 miles an hour regularly during spring training, which is, as Jensen can probably attest, kind of early to be hitting 100 miles an hour in your first couple outings in spring training, and he'll be up during the year. Braden Montgomery, who was part of that trade that you were talking about with Garrett Crochet, he could be up later in the year. So they have their core up front, and they have guys to help. So I think it's going to be youth, it's going to be energy, and I think, a little bit proving some people wrong. I think they have lost 100 plus in 3 straight years. So I think you're trying to show people that, they want to surprise people. They want to do more than just win 68, 69 games. They'd like to contend in a division that, while is very strong at the top, in Detroit, maybe probably one of the best starting rotations in baseball, right? The Royals are very good. The Guardians, no matter how many times you think, oh, they're not going to do anything, they're always right there, right? So, and the Twins are kind of starting their rebuild. So I think the Sox feel like, the division is there to contend if they can make some moves. But it's about that energy, the youth, and then, seeing what they can add on as the season goes.
Catching up with Scott Merkin of MLB.com, does a fabulous job covering the White Sox on the beat there. All right, let's go to my wheelhouse here, and I am very bullish on your opening day starter, or at least he should be. Shane Smith is going to be one of those young leaders of a rotation. I always find it fascinating when you look at guys with service time. The projected top 3 starters have just a tick over a year or so of service time, yet I think Shane Smith has that ability to be able to start to take that next step. Expectations for you and for our audience, could he be kind of that 30-plus start guy? Will he be that innings horse that Will Venable has kind of anointed him as? How do you see that Sox rotation being able to play, especially within this American League Central?
Yeah, those projected first 3 are very interesting. Shane should be the opening day starter. They haven't announced that yet. And he went from, top pick in the Rule 5 draft in 24 to All-Star in 25 to, having his struggles, as you're going to have, right, to righting the ship and then almost throwing a perfect game the last game of the season. And he's a really interesting young man because he's one of those guys, and you notice this when you talk to him, he kind of he listens to the question and doesn't just give the answer like you want to hear. He thinks about what's being said, and that's kind of the cerebral way he approaches the game. The second starter right now is Anthony Kay, who went over to Japan, had a great season, came back to the White Sox. And one thing, as you guys know, when you have the rebuilds, you have this runway you can give guys, right? You can give, younger guys a chance to develop. You can give guys who are taking a chance who went to Japan to reinvent themselves a chance to get 25, 30 starts if things go well. And then Davis Martin, who's kind of the galvanizing force in that clubhouse. And, he's come back from Tommy John. He had a solid year for them last year. I think he made 25 starts last year. So it's an interesting young crew. And then, behind them, Eric Fetty is back with the White Sox. Sean Burke is there. Jonathan Cannon. They're stretching out 9 guys right now, to have that ability to start. Now, obviously, they're not going with a 9-man rotation. That would weaken the bullpen a little bit. But, they're going to have those options to go to. They'll have the 5 to break the year with, and then they'll have guys they can go to during the years. Mike Vassell is getting a look as a starter after doing so many different things well for them in the bullpen last year and spot starting. But, yeah, the first 3 I really like. I like that whole rotation. It's not guys who are going to go out there and do what Garrett Crochet does, strike out 12, walk 1 over 8 innings, but they'll keep in games. They'll give you a chance to win. And Shane Smith has that chance to, after being an all-star as a rookie, after finishing strong, to being that elite guy at the top of the rotation.
Scott, we really appreciate the time. Appreciate you getting up early here out there in Arizona. and enjoying a little bit of spring ball out there. So best of luck to the Sox this year. Maybe a little bit more fun to cover them this year with the expectations being a little bit higher this year, maybe into that 70-win plateau. That would be nice to see as well. Give them a follow on X at Scott Merkin. Great job at MLB.com as their senior reporter.